Hey guys, it's Matt from Eastwood. We're here in the Eastwood garage doing another live tech session. If you guys haven't watched this before, we do live tech sessions Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Wednesdays I try and do a little project or some technical, something a little more technical to hopefully educate you guys. About a week ago or so, we started working on this Tri-Five Fender, and I showed common repair where the top eyebrow is rotted out. And I showed cutting out the old part. We fitted in, we took another cap here and showed you how to modify it and fit it in place. For any of you guys that missed that video, if you go to our YouTube channel, the username's Eastwood Co. We actually have that, the recorded version of that on there, so you can watch that later on. What we have now is we have a little bit of footage that we'll queue up here. I can show you what we did in between. So between the last video, I took the SCT and I stripped down the paint because I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any issues when we're welding with having any old paint or rust to get into my weld seam. So I ground back the paint, any little bit of surface rust, and then I took the DA sander and just took off the primer that comes on this patch panel. So here we're all prepped up, ready to go. I started using the stitch weld magnets just to kind of fit it over top and see where I was at. And here we have it overlapped, and I used our scribe from our metal layout kit to scribe the cap where it laid over, and I used the aviation snips to trim off that area. And then I like to use the slapping file just to file down any sharp edges and get it to fit a little better. So here I'm just test fitting using our locking welding pliers, set everything in place, and of course filing again. Here you can see a close-up of the fit, how we're getting everything to fit up real close. You want almost no gap when we're TIG welding. And here I was welding up the sides, so I did all the kind of hard to get spots before we started here. And I have the TIG 200 digital set up for pulse, and we got everything welded up. Now we're at the point of, I left a little section here at the top, weld for you guys live on camera. And I'm going to weld this up, show you guys how the TIG 200 works with doing sheet metal, TIG 200 digital. And also I'm going to show you a little bit of finishing the weld out, hammering it, a couple of the techniques that I used, and we'll just work on this for a little while and see where we can get. If you guys have any questions along the way, Randy's over here on the chat. He's doing the live chat here.
If you have any questions, post them in the comment. I'll throw them back to Matt, let him take care of you. And he's going to be showing off the new TIG 200 digital. Are we going to be seeing any pulse or 4T or modes today or anything in that?
Yeah, I think so. I dialed the machine in ahead of time in the video you guys were seeing before. This machine has a number of presets in it. I set one of the presets for doing the sheet metal on this particular job here. So I'll turn this machine on because we're going to get right into welding here. And we got it clicked on. So I have the machine set up using the 4T function with the finger switch, and I have my pre-flow set at 0.4 seconds. I have my starting amperage at 15 amps. Then I have a second and a half where it ramps up, and then we're going to be welding at 37 amps. And then I have the pulse feature turned on, so it's going to drop down 55%. So it's going to drop down a little over half the amperage as it's pulsing. I have a 0 ramp down time, so with this getting hot, I want it to ramp down really quick to my ending amperage of 11 amps. And then finally, we're going to have a post flow of 2 seconds. So, and of course we have the high frequency set up. So this panel is a little tricky. As I'll show you guys, we're going to get some under the hood shots here. The helmet. The panel, the replacement panel, and you're going to run across this a lot when you guys are buying patch panels from, just online. A lot of these patch panels are 20 gauge steel, and the fender or the part on a lot of these old cars are 19 gauge. So there's a difference in the thickness of the metal, and when you're welding, it's going to take less amperage to burn this replacement part away as it is the original metal. So you got to kind of dance around on the piece. It's a little difficult. And the pulse feature comes in real handy because it's dropping the amperage down as we're welding. So I can kind of control that heat and try and keep it from burning holes in the panel as much. So I have some O35 filler rod here. if you guys, this filler rod, this is the straight TIG rod that's the same as what we sell in our 1/16 and 3/32. If you guys, I'm going to flop over to here. You can buy this at a welding supply store, but you got to buy 10-pound packs of it. So if you don't do a lot of TIG welding of sheet metal, what you can do, a little tip, is you can run off some MIG wire off your MIG spool, and you can straighten it out and use that wire. And that's usually okay to do for most cases. But I do so much sheet metal work, I usually buy a 10-pound pack, and it lasts me quite some time. So I got my ground on, and I'm going to start up front here, and then we're going to run along here. So whenever Joe's set up, and I'll try and talk you guys through the process here. So this is the 4T, so I'm just set up here at 10 amps, holding the switch down so I can kind of use my arc as a flashlight to see where I'm at. Now that I'm ready to weld, I'm going to let off the switch, get a second and a half, and it's starting to pulse. So we're pulsing in, and I'm just kind of melting the two of them together. If I see that it starts to want to open up a hole, I'm adding a little filler rod, like right there, we got a little bit. I'm just trying to move along as we go. And I'm just adding filler rod. Again, I'm kind of watching it and waiting for the pulse, and I'm adding a little bit as I go. Now we got a spot here where I tack welded, so I'm going to kind of just blend that all in. And I got a little spot that's wanting to open up, so I'm just adding the filler rod. As I go. And I'm going to probably have to stop here soon because I'm going to get a little out of position. If I stop here. Oop, and I touched. That happens. Got a little greedy there. So that does happen if you touch, especially on sheet metal. I grind my tungsten to a point, and you got to flop it around. That change in your arc will definitely create more additional heat. So I'm going to try and reposition here so I can kind of work the rest of this. One thing, if Joe can get in here, you can see sometimes people ask about starting and stopping. The real key is to get a consistent heat into the panel. So you can see I got a pretty consistent heat zone here, and I was going a little slower than I probably normally would, just as we were talking through here. But let me get my stupid rod off there. All right. So, but the consistency is what's key. We don't want to have it go right down and then real big and then small and big. Sometimes when you start jumping around, you get a big difference, and it's hotter here than it was here, than it is here, and that's what creates really drastic highs and lows in a panel that can cause issues. So I have a real consistent heat zone here, and you try and keep that throughout, so that way that we know when we go to hammer and dolly it to reverse the shrink, we're hammering on it about the same throughout the whole thing, and it shouldn't cause too much issue. So let me see if I can get the rest of this. I got a couple little spots that'll down here at the bottom where I have to be a little out of position for what we're doing, but I'll try and, I think I'm going to kneel. So I got this little hole here I'm going to have to fix where I touched, but so I got a spot, I'm jumping over that spot I've already done. Just feeding, kind of letting it melt together, but I'm adding a little bit to kind of keep it, much like you would with an oxyacetylene torch. I'm trying to, adding that filler actually helps cool it down a little bit. And move over that section there. Try and see if I can get it all the way down. But the key is to try and keep moving all the time. And I'm going to stop here. So I'm going to hit the switch. It ramps down 15 amps. And then I can let off And by golly, I actually got all the way down there. I thought I was going to have to go again. So now we'll try and get a shot here, but you can see the heat zone as we run around. That's our welding. That quick. I'll flip this off. So hopefully you guys can see there under the hood how just adding a little bit of filler rod. I'm mainly just melding it together because we got the fit pretty darn good where you're just flowing the two little bit of metal together. I don't want to put any more filler rod than I need into the panel because it's going to cause excess grinding that we don't want to have to do on the panel. But you can see the heat zone is pretty much the same throughout here. That little area where I jumped over is a little smaller. But even when you get down into here where I welded the other day, the heat zone is pretty darn close. This section's a little bit bigger in here. But overall, it's about the same. We don't have drastic changes in the heat zone, which is really key with the warping that you're going to be trying to fight here. So we'll show you guys a couple spots here. Joe, you may have to get from over top here. But you can see this is a section I welded the other day. There's a little bit, not a lot of warpage, just a tiny bit right there, right around where our heat affected zone is. So we should be able to hammer and dolly on that pretty lightly, and that should come right out. We'll go up here to where I just welded, and I have a little extra material there. Yeah, so that area there actually didn't sink too much at all. Once we hit off that tiny bit of weld, that didn't sink too much. Now in here, what I actually did was I had a little bit of a large gap. The gap was a little bigger than I wanted here, so right before this broadcast, I hammered and dollied on dolly on the seam to actually stretch the metal to get it closer. So that little bit extra stretching and the shrinking that occurred, it ended up being kind of even itself out. So that's not going to take too much at all there. So the warping isn't too bad. This section where we have this highlight line or this body line that we talked about in the first, the other episode, that here where the weld is, when we're done finishing that all, we'll probably have to put that back in with the hammer and the pick end of the hammer and just raise that up a little bit because we're going to have to sand that. So the first thing I'm going to do now is my glasses. First thing I do is you need to sand both sides of the panel. When you want to hammer and dolly the panel like this, you want to sand both sides because when we're hammering and dollying, we may have some weld on the other side that's a little uneven, and when you're hammering on that, it's just extra material that you don't need to be hammering on. You want it to be as smooth as possible on both sides. So I'm gonna flip this upside down. I'm really just going to focus on this top area, crown area here today, just due to time constraints. And then, so I'm going to flip this and hit the inside real quick. But Joe, if we can get a shot on the inside, I want to show the penetration. I'll flip this up for you so you can get the shot. So the key is where we welded here. You can see we're getting full penetration. That's the other key when you're doing sheet metal. You can turn this machine all the way down like I showed you with the starting amperage to 10 amps. Sure, you could melt some filler rod on the top and glue the two of these together, but when you want to metal finish this and sand it, it's not welded all the way through. You're going to grind it and you're going to break off. It's going to crack. But you can see this is 100% penetration all the way through. We don't have any real major highs in here. There's a couple little spots here and there, but for the most part, the area on the bottom here has the same amount of material, extra material as the top side does, which is very little, which is good. So this area here, I should be able to sand this up real quick to something smooth. But that's the key, is make sure you get the full penetration when you're welding. So I'm going to sand here for a second. Again, if you have any questions as we're working on this, shoot them over to Randy. He's happy to answer questions for you or save some for me. So I'm using a 36 grit on our little pneumatic die grinder here. I like to use this. It works pretty good. And I like to just put these little cookie discs on them. I use 36 grit when I'm knocking down the weld, just because it cuts really quick. And with the edge of these, they have a little overlap, so I can kind of turn it on edge and focus it right on the actual weld. You don't want to be grinding too much and taking material off of either side of the panel. So you want to be mainly just grinding the weld itself. So I try and focus mainly on that. Once you see it hitting both sides, you know you're pretty close to flush. All right, so that's pretty good on that side. I'm going to flip it back over. We'll dress the top side here, and then we'll start showing you some techniques for trying to finish this out a little better.
When you were welding there, what size electrode were you using? Do you remember?
Good question. I have a 1/16 electrode I was using. I'm actually using a gray band electrode. That's like a hybrid that comes with the TIG 200 digital. I've been using the gray band at home for a number of years, and I really, really like them, especially on doing sheet metal. They have a really nice fine arc. It doesn't wander too much, and it's really good to do pinpoint work. Also at high amperage, it's nice because I haven't had issues. I can run a 1/16 at like 160, 170, 180 amps. It still holds together pretty good if I need to get in a tight area that I don't want to use the 3/32. So yeah, 1/16 sheet metal for sure. 3/32, it's just a larger arc, which you don't need. You want it to be as small as possible. So you can notice I'm staying basically within that heat affected zone. I'm not going out too far than that when I'm sanding. You don't want to have to sand any more than you need to. All right, so that's pretty good for the area we're working. If I have to touch anything up, we can, but that's the majority of the grinding. So if you can, don't really use a flap disc. That was a big issue I used to do, is I used a flap disc for many years, and it was so big, ended up just gouging out the metal on either side of it, and I was doing extra work that was caused by using that. Another trick you can do that some guys like to do is you get a real fine cutoff wheel that's on the thicker side, and you can actually use that and just grind just the weld. Really, really, you can do some delicate work with that, which is nice. So let me grab a couple tools here. First thing I'm going to show you guys a trick, and we'll take some questions while this dries. So if you use, this is blue layout fluid, like machinist dye. Try and turn it so you guys can see better. I know my can's a little messy here, but the machinist or layout fluid is really good. Kind of like a guide coat when you're doing body work. You spray this on, just real light, over the panel. And we're just trying to get it covered, dusted on. This stuff dries really quick, which is nice. What this is going to do is it's going to kind of give us a roadmap for this is also the time when I get really, really depressed, because the Vixen file and the machinist die will keep you as honest as it gets, because, man, when you start sanding this, it's very, very sad. So we're going to do, I have a Vixen file here, a body file. There's two different, let me grab the other one, sorry. So we sell a number of different styles. This is my favorite. We've been selling these for, oh God, probably 30 years or something. These are just traditional wooden handled body files, Vixen files. This is something that's been around since beginning of body work and metalworking goes. But these are really great. One's a half round, one is a flat. So depending on the area that you need to get into, a half round, obviously, if it's an area that has a little bit of curve, you're not hitting the edges of the file on it. So we're working on, across the top of this, so it's not going to be too big of a deal to use the flat, but I'll keep the other one there just in case. And
hey, Matt,
we're going to let that dry for a minute. So
is that patch 20 gauge?
Yes.
It is, right?
Yeah, so the patch, yeah, it's good. I should reiterate that. The patch was 20 gauge, which is kind of what you're going to find with most of the replacement panels nowadays, is that they come in 20 gauge, but the car that you're working on is probably 19 gauge or 18 gauge. So you do have to be careful. Like I said, you fight that when I was welding it, that it's going to want to burn away your patch panel before your original metal. So you have to be really careful when you're welding it, and that's something that a lot of people have problems with. I fought it with this thing too. So let's see here. Like I said, this stuff dries quick, but it needs another minute or two. So we're going to be using the Vixen file here. I have a slapper. This is I've had this thing forever. So we sell a Martin version of this slapper. We sell a smaller slapper that's a Fairmont brand that is good for finish work at the end. Here I would use that for just getting tiny little ones out, little dents. But this one's got a little more weight to it, so I may need to use that in here to just smooth out some of our weld. For a dolly, what I'm going to be using is, I have this dolly here that has a slight curve to it. Should I get it? There. So the face that I'm going to be hammering on, I'm trying to get this, there we go, has a slight curve to it. Now the inside of this fender where I may be hammering, if we're using the slapper, is a little curved. So that's why I chose this one ahead of time. It fits the best. You always want to find a dolly that fits your panel as the best as possible. So I got a slapper, got a file, couple hammers here. This is our reverse curve hammer that we sell. It's a Fairmont hammer. So the cool thing about this, it has a curve on this face here going side to side. And then this one here has a curve that goes up and down. So the cool thing with this is if you have a panel that has a curve to it and you're worried about hitting the edges of the hammer and actually scarring the metal, you can choose this hammer to hammer on it, turn it either way to do that, which is really handy with this one because, again, it has a side-to-side curve on it. So I'm going to use the hammer head that has the same kind of curve in it, so I can get in here and hammer, and I'm not hitting the edges of the hammer like a flat one would do. If I was using this hammer on the inside, I'd be hitting these outside edges here, and what it'll do is it'll transfer those edges. It'll telegraph it to the other side of the metal. So that one's okay to use on the top side, but not on the bottom. So there's that. Here's our straight edge, and we might need the slapping file. All right, let's see. We'll test this here and see if it's fairly. You can see it's dry. I mean, I've been BSing for only a couple minutes here, and it's fairly dry. So let's hit it with the file, and this is going to tell us where we're at. I apologize if I'm in the way of the screen. So I'm not using any pressure. All we're doing is just, we want this to tell us where there's highs and lows where we welded. Now this will take a lot of material off quick, so you don't want to push too hard at first. So right away, the cool thing with this die is it's telling us, you know, this is giving us a roadmap of where we need to hammer. So this is something that's helped me a lot over the years. Is it's kind of disheartening at first to hit it with the file because, man, it looks rough, you know. But the good thing is it tells you where to hit, and you can really just keep dialing it in. So we could see right here, pretty much this little band right in here is low. And actually in here it's not too bad currently. I mean, it is low right out here. So I'm going to hammer on the weld kind of to this side just a little bit, see if we can bring that up a hair, and we'll kind of keep working. So I'm gonna hammer on the weld just a little bit, see if I can crush the weld. Nice thing with a TIG weld is you can kind of crush it down. So I'll use this. And we got our dolly here, so I'm going to put the dolly underneath. I'm hammering on dolly. You want to listen for that ring. So I'm putting upward pressure. I'm hooking the fender with my knee, putting upward pressure on the dolly to kind of raise it up. And I'm listening for that ring. I'll try and keep that little peak if I can. So I'm going to turn my dolly. I'm turning my dolly on the inside so that it runs. I'll turn it to the camera here. So if my peak of the fender is running like this, I'm going to turn this dolly so that it's in that peak there. So when I'm hammering on it, I'm not at least crushing that peak in, and it requires a lot of work to hammer it out later on in the project. So you just got to sometimes think of that stuff ahead because it might save you a ton of work down the road, or finishing work at least. So I'm just going to try and get this kind of hooked in the peak there. So we can see all right, so when I'm hitting on this weld, it's crushing the weld out and flattening it. Instead of taking a ton of material off, we're just squishing the weld down, which is kind of handy here. So after you do a little bit of hammering, take the file again. And you see what's happening? This is cool. So even though it was low right in here, like I showed you guys in the beginning, you can see we're already starting to sand away that little bit. And did I hammer there? No, I didn't even touch this with a hammer. That's because the metal here, because it was shrinking here from the weld, was pulling the metal that's right adjacent to it and was pulling that metal down and making a low spot. So by me hammering right here on the weld, you can see I'm sanding just the same, and it's actually taking those low spots are coming out. They're sanding away because they've now kind of been brought up by hammering this out and stretching the metal. It's relieving the panel and letting you take out some of the tension there, so it's not low anymore. I'm being real light on this peak here because it's a high spot, you can actually rip through that peak because it's actually like a corner. If I push too hard on the file, actually can cut through that. So when I get close to that peak, I'm kind of not pushing as hard for that reason. So you can see already just from that little bit of hammering I did and a little filing here, this spot that took up this whole area here is now just these couple little spots there. So we can try and work them out. I still got a little lip here, so I could probably either hammer or file that weld just a little more flat. And you don't want to use this as a crutch and just sand 3/4 of the metal off, but you just want to, you know, if there's a little, it'll take just minor highs and lows off of the panel, which is nice. So we definitely got some lows right next to it. I'm going to hammer just a little more on that, on the weld right in here. See if I can get a little bit of that to come out. And you also notice I'm not swinging it like I'm driving a nail in. I'm listening for when I get contact. So it's hollow there. I know I don't want to hit real hard because I don't have. When you hear it's hollow, you're not connecting. So you're going to be putting dents in the panel. So you don't want to be doing that. Any questions as I'm tinkering around here?
Yeah, a few people want to know why you prefer TIG welding or what the advantages are over MIG welding.
Cool. Yeah, that's a common question we get, and probably the biggest thing with body working, you know, we see. TIG welding. I'll go backwards. Oxyacetylene and TIG welding are the two softest welds as far as thin gauge goes that you can work. So obviously we're doing TIG welding today, and the question was about TIG or MIG. TIG welding is softer, so the way you're actually welding it, the process, the weld is softer. So I can crush this like I was showing you guys with the hammer and dolly. I can hammer, I can crush the weld, and if this was a panel that we were putting in the English wheel or in a planishing hammer or something like that, this will act just like the rest of the metal will, and you can blend it in and metal finish it, and there's no issue. MIG welding tends to be a harder weld, which means that it will fracture. So when you start hammering excessively on a weld seam that's been MIG welded, it will tend to crack. If you try to run it through an English wheel, it's so hard of a weld, it can actually damage the wheel. It can put nicks in your English wheel. Planishing hammer is strong enough to crush it, but it's going to end up cracking it. So MIG welding works fine if you set your joint up correctly. Like we have the perfect panel prep tool that we developed. It's really great for MIG welding because it creates a small little bevel that you can put your weld in so that it is flush, so that you just have to hit it lightly with a sander and it's pretty much as is, and it's good to go. So that can be used. I always tell people you use the technique that is the most comfortable for you. If you're no good at TIG welding, if you just bought a TIG welder yesterday, don't do this. Don't just try and jump into doing a patch repair like this, because the process to set up a panel for TIG welding takes, I don't know, 4 times as long to do it. And if you're not real controlled with your TIG welding, you're going to burn giant monster holes in this, warp the hell out of it, and you're going to have a mess on your hands. So TIG welding I prefer. I think it's pretty much the best as far as modern day solutions go, but you can make a lot more work if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't have enough practice, I should say. So if you're going to do a repair like this, practice on a fender you don't care about, because more than likely you'll mess it up. So that was a good one. So I'm going to hammer back on this seam a little more. All right, so let's hit this with the file again. I mean, I'm just doing a little bit of hammering here. Hope you guys can see. This thing's dancing around on me. So with the file, obviously the way the blade cuts, it's kind of directional here. So you can either cut it when you're in your pushing stroke, or you can cut the metal when you're in your pulling stroke. So whatever's comfortable for you. I mean, the handle is like this, and it's meant, the most common way is to use it like this, which is great if it's on a car or the panel doesn't flop around like this. But I find myself, I'm usually working on a panel that's off the car. I'm by myself, working on my own, and I'll have a way to clamp it down. So I usually turn it backwards like this, and you can turn this file whichever way you want. And then I hold it like this, and I can hold the panel with one hand, and I can file with the other one. So all personal preference, but so you can see up top here, again, if you guys saw in the beginning, this area here was all one big blue splotch. Here it's going away. We got one little spot there. I'm not going to worry too much about this spot. What you're trying to do right now is, there's two ways you can work this. We can either work from one end and make it perfect all the way through, or you can kind of work the panel, get it so you don't have too much, big areas that are real low, and then you can come back. So an area like this, I'll probably work this with the Bullseye Pick or the slapper. So we'll show you that in a minute. I'm going to try and see if I can feel the spot. And actually I got my straight edge here. I'll show you guys. So this spot right here, it's right adjacent to the peak. And we'll see if you guys can see. I don't know if Joe, you can get down there or not. See the space between it. I know this is kind of tough. Maybe not. Yeah, there you go. So there's a little gap there where that blue is showing. It's telling me it's low. I mean, I could feel it with my hand, but we don't quite have that 3D technology, or not 3D. We don't quite have that interactive technology yet where you guys can feel the panel. But believe me, that thing's low. So you can see it with that. So that there, I'm going to probably try and tap on that or hit that with the slapper a little bit from underneath. So I'm just going to use this same dolly here. Let me see if I can get in there with the slapper. That's where it might get a little tough. I think we're going to have to use the hammer. Yep. So we're going to use the hammer here and see if I can just lightly, again, we're just doing light. I'm just doing light little taps, listening for the ringing. So as I hear ringing, I know I'm starting to contact it, and I'm getting closer. So you don't want to, again, be swinging the hammer. With this stuff, you don't want to be swinging the hammer like you're pissed off at it. You just light taps. And if we're hammering too hard on dolly like that, you can actually stretch the metal, and then you're going to get an oil can and have an issue, which you're not going to want to have to deal with. So let me change dollies here. Use this little guy. Yeah. Getting there. Feel it's a little better. So I'm going to hit it a couple more times and I'll see. We'll check it with the file again right here. it's getting better. Cool. So now, anytime, it seems redundant, but every time you hit it with the hammer a little bit, just check yourself with the file. So already you can see these little spots that are instantly getting highlighted down in here. That's where my hammer was actually hitting and raising it up. So they're a tiny bit high there, so you're just knocking down the light highs. But you can already see real quick how it's going to pick up. And you can see that big area is almost gone. And we got a couple little spots here and there. Again, you can take this as far as you want to go. If you want to spend the time, you can make this completely perfect. No blue showing at all, which means it's pretty much dead flat. And you can just hit it with some sealer and some high build primer, block it out, and it's perfect. No filler at all. Just depends where you want to take it. This stuff here is really low. Really minor how low it is. This would be completely acceptable to put a skim coat over this in here, not this stuff. I would take this a little further. But this stuff in here, if you're seeing these little blotches like this, these are very, very minor low spots that, a very thin coat of body filler would fill those in. But I like to show you guys, the range. You can take it from this all the way up to perfectly metal finish like all the superstars on the internet do. But most of my projects aren't that nice, and I'm A-okay with a swipe of filler. So that blue spot, that thing's almost gone. There's a couple little spots of halos there. So let me work, now that we're getting this half decent here, let me attack this with the Bullseye Pick, like this obvious low spot there. Show you guys how to use the Bullseye Pick and why they're handy. Any other questions as I'm rolling my lazy self over here?
Yeah. Yes, Bob on YouTube would like to know what your favorite band is. We're starting to get personal here.
Favorite band?
Trying to find out who the real Matt is. I think we're digging deeper.
Is this Bob from the retail store?
No, it's not.
Favorite band?
But this is Bob's Kids Fender, so anybody from the Pottstown area who's a fan of Bob.
Yes, this is Bob's son's Fender, and they were about to throw this thing in the trash because it was pretty rusty, and I like a challenge, so we decided to do it for a live. Favorite band? Oh man, depends on the genre of rock. I am a big Dio fan, believe it or not, and Dio era Black Sabbath is some of my favorite jams, especially in the garage. Hopefully I didn't make anybody too mad with that.
Is that late 70s, or is that early 80s, Black Sabbath?
I think it's 70s, right?
Is it 70s?
Yeah.
It was after...
Yeah, the 70s stuff, the anything Dio I kind of did, well, I shouldn't say anything Dio, but a lot of that stuff is pretty good. Even some Rainbow, for any of you Dio fans, the early stuff.
Now that is 70s.
Yeah.
Rainbow. Now that was also on guitar, was Richie Blackmore?
You know that stuff a little more than me.
Maybe if anybody's out there, they can help us. I think Richie Blackmore might have been the guitarist.
I'm sure our coworker Nick Kopinski would know this stuff pretty good because this is getting into some of his hair metal years. So, getting off course here. The Bullseye Pick. Well, let me turn so you guys can see here. Bullseye Pick. We sell these in 3 different sizes. These are essential if you're trying to do body work or you're trying to finish something half decently nice. These are really, really handy. A couple reasons these are handy. One, you can actually pinpoint an area that's very, very, very difficult to get with a hammer. When we're messing with the spots I have here, it would be hard for me because I'm blind when I'm swinging the hammer to hit a spot that dead center and get it for first try. Bullseye Pick, you got this little, just like it sounds like, you have a little bullseye here, or half of one. You have this little half moon shape right there. Do you want me to put it over the fender or something? Or?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let me do that so you guys, my feet aren't in the shot. There we go. So, bullseye section. So what you want to do with the bullseye section is you want to aim it. So we got our little spot right here that's low. I'm going to aim my bullseye right there, right over that area. And I don't know if I'm blocking the light here, but so yeah, you can put it right where that spot is. Pull it away a little bit, right there. So by doing that, when you put it on this end, it comes down when you're swinging this, and you're actually hitting right underneath at that spot. So you can aim with this. So this has a little spring in it that it wants to make it spring down. A little thing that I've done to my small bullseye pick here, and I'll grab one of my, I think this one I didn't modify yet, but these come with a fairly sharp point on them from the factory, which is good because if you're doing real fine work, you need a sharp point. This one here is fairly sharp. I think I rounded it just a little bit. So you can see it's pretty sharp there. Pretty sharp of a point. It actually comes even a little sharper than that, which is nice. It's good to start with that because you can always flatten it out a little bit with a sander. So you can get real fine work. My small one that I use most commonly, I've rounded off here. I've rounded this off a little bit because I've found that that's a little more gentle on the panel. It's a little more forgiving. With the real pointy tip as it comes, if you swing this just a little hard in the wrong spot, you can actually put little, like real bad high little peaks in it, and then you got to hammer them flat or file them down. So I found for me it's a little better. So you want to put a little bit of pressure down, not like all your body weight, but a little pressure down so this is tight on the panel, and then you're going to swing this, and I actually move it around as I do it because you're trying to just hit that general area. And we'll go over here. And you can just start hitting it up a little bit. So I did a little bit there. Let me hit it with the file and just check it. So we're going to focus on this little area here. It's probably tough to see, but when I catch the light just right, I can see little tiny high spots where it hit and raised it a little bit. And there we go. Just like that, that little spot is gone. So that's how you metal finish. I mean, that's basically it. So you're gonna work those spots, and so we got this area right in here pretty darn good. I mean, there's a little spot. Actually, let me hit that because I did bullseye that area. So in here, we got it pretty good. I mean, if you guys are just tuning in, this we probably had a spot right in here that was all blue, that was low. So I hammered on the weld to stretch the weld a little bit and relieve the tension that was pulling this section down for the most part. And then I hammered just a little bit on the low spots on dolly to bring them up. And then the little small spots that we were missing, we just hit with the bullseye pick. Fills it in, you file it off the tiny bit of highs, and that thing's nice and flat. So we can work around the whole panel. So the next thing I would do, I'm going to work right in here real quick, and eventually we're going to run out of time, but I'll show you guys how to work through this. So right here next to the weld is all low in here, and it's going to be hard for me to hammer. I'm afraid if I hammer on dolly too hard on this weld, because I've already hammered on it a little bit, I'm going to overstretch the metal, and then I'm going to have an oil can here. So what I'm going to do is just work with the bullseye pick right next to your seam. This happens, I don't care if you're MIG welding or TIG welding, whatever you're doing, this happens pretty much every time. you're going to get a little area that's low right next to the weld, like that. So sometimes when you hammer on the weld, you'll get it to flatten out and it won't take anything. But sometimes you have to go a little further. So there is a little edge on this weld here. I'm going to hit it with the file just a little more, and then we'll use the Bullseye Pick. There we go. So it's getting in closer. Right in here it's all low in there. So we're going to take the small Bullseye Pick again. I like to use the smallest one possible for the Bullseye Pick because I can have a little more control over it. I'm closer to the panel. So and I can see if you got good lighting, you can look overhead and kind of watch it. And you'll see it actually raise that spot up. So I can actually feel it there. So what I do sometimes is I actually raise it up a little further than it needs to be, just so I'm sure that the whole gap is raised. And then I'll show you what you do afterwards. So that area is actually probably a little high now. So if we hit that with the file, we're actually going to be taking a ton of material off because it's a little high. So instead of using the file right away, what I like to do is take your slapper, because it's hitting a larger broad area. So what it's going to do is it's going to flatten out kind of the whole area when you hit with this, and you're not hitting on a defined area where you may just put more dents in it. With the slapper, we can hit kind of over the whole area that we're working and just kind of level everything out. So I'm holding the dolly right on that spot where we were working with the Bullseye Pick. So you shouldn't be stretching with a slapper. You're just hitting hard enough to kind of smooth everything out. To stretch with a slapper, you got to really be smashing on the metal, and you shouldn't really be doing that at any time when you're finishing a panel like this. So we're hitting on that area. Got it pretty flat. Let's hit it with the file. Any questions before I start filing?
Yes. We have one question from Darkside Customs. Do you recommend a reapplication of the guide coat to ensure you're not creating new highs and lows?
Yes. At a certain point, it's not a bad idea. What I'm doing right now is fairly delicate. So if you're working fairly delicate, you're probably not creating too much for highs and lows. But yeah, usually what I'll do is, like I said, I'll rough in the panel to the point where we only have those little tiny spots like I already fixed in here. And I'll probably hit the whole area with a DA sander just to take any of the dye off, and then I'll reapply. That is a good practice. But after you start doing this for a while, you kind of know. I mean, you can feel. You guys have done body work before. I mean, you could run your hand over a panel and feel if you suddenly got a high or a low that wasn't there a few minutes ago. So, I always do that. But yeah, it's not a bad idea. I usually, if I'm really trying to make a panel nice, like I just did a dash for myself recently, I reapplied 3 times probably because I really wanted to get it dead flat as I was going. So that's not a bad practice. And the stuff dries so quick, it makes sense sometimes. But the key is you want to take off, which I forgot to mention, if you are reapplying, make sure you're taking off all the old stuff, because sometimes then it'll actually cause more issues, because if you leave all this on and then we apply more, you might get an area that was low before and isn't low now, and you're sanding it and it causes an issue. So take a DA sander, take 99% of it off, then reapply so that you don't have any areas that are reading incorrectly. So I'm already hitting this area. And we can see that actually right in here, it's starting to flatten out pretty good. I'm going to probably hit that with the slapper because it's still a little high. And then I'm gonna keep working this little area here for you guys. I don't know how we're doing on time, but there we go. Little high spots going away. So I could tell it was a little too high there, and I was just cutting a ton of the material off. And you don't want to cut off more than you have to, so I fine-tuned it with the slapper. So you guys can see this spot right in here where I was really working the Bullseye Pick. It's filling in. So it's got a nice flow. It's starting to get to it. That's starting to turn out half decent in there. So, I mean, the big key is you want this to flow. So you want it to just kind of all blend in real nice. And then we can actually work this area, you know, at the end if we want to. But right now this weld seam is where we want to make sure that that's flat so it disappears. You sand it off like this, it's not going to ghost on you. And by ghost, I mean when you paint a vehicle and you could see a spot where a guy put a body filler, a bunch of body filler, or laid a seam in. When we're doing it this way, your metal finish it, the seam's gone. So you're going to have less of a tendency to have that occur. Other things can cause that, but you know, if you just slap body filler over top of this and just go with it, you may have more of a chance of that showing in the long term. So by doing this, we're hammering it and we're making it a seamless repair eventually. All right. So I'm going to hit a little bit in there with the Bullseye Pick. And if you guys have any questions, I'm probably getting close to being done here.
A few people just said you're doing a great job. You must have a lot of patience. And
yes.
Old friend Yannick wants to know if you like Holy Diver by Dio.
Oh my God, Holy Diver is the jam. Yes.
They were digging deeper today. We have an hour. We've been here an hour. So.
Holy Diver. Yeah. Soul Survivor. Yeah. Probably the best, my favorite, Heaven and Hell. That's like my jam. That's the one. You blast it with the radio on, let my mullet fly. I go with that one. Yes, this does take a lot of patience. I mean, this is something you gotta. You're more doing this for you know, because you want to do it really nice. I mean, again, some of this stuff that I'm messing with in here, you could easily put a swipe over that and fill it, and it would never be an issue. But it's not bad to at least teach yourself to do this method so you have it in you to do it. So you have the ability to take it that far if you really need to someday. Once you've done it a couple times, you kind of know what to expect. And since I just do this for a hobby, you know, on my own cars, I don't do this. I won't spend 10 hours finishing a fender. I'll work on it for a few hours here, a few hours there. Then it doesn't seem so bad. It's different when you got a shop and you got to get it done as quick as possible. So I'm just striking with the Bullseye Pick, pushing down. And this is kind of doing the same effect as hammering off dolly, where we're pushing down around the low spot and we're rising up around it, and it's just kind of bringing the two of them on an equal plane. All right, do that, hit it with the slapper a little bit, and then we're gonna probably call it good for now. Bob probably owes me lunch for this or something, I don't know. I like pizza, Bob. Let's see here. So we're getting closer. Let's see how we made out with this little. So that section's, we're filling in right in there. So I'll hit this quick with the sander and show you guys that little section, and then if you have any last questions, drop them in and then we'll be done. So let's hit this with a little Palm DA. I love this guy for doing work like this with 80 grit. All right, I'll let you guys check out that little section I was working there. Obviously on the other side there we didn't get to that, but there you can see what you can bring that finish up to. So that right there is pretty good right in here where we welded. Could probably work it a little more if I did another round of guide coat and worked it even further. I could probably get it a little better. Honestly, the minor highs and lows here, a high build primer would fill that right up, and you block sand that out and it's on its way to being awesome. So any other questions before we wrap it up?
No, I think you took care of everything on Facebook and YouTube today.
Sweet.
We had a lot of people on YouTube today.
Oh, cool, awesome.
So.
And for any of you guys that are catching us at the end, or part of the way through, this is a two-part series. So we did a live a week or two ago where I started this. That is on YouTube currently, and we're going to upload this as well, part two, so you can watch it from beginning to end. And then we may, I don't know if we're going to, we may put a one long video. Do we think about that?
Yeah,
so,
we may have one long video with both segments showing the full repair.
But we usually, on our channel, we usually package stuff together. So if it is two parts, it'll be kind of right next to itself. But you guys can watch the repair. If you're doing one of these eyebrows on a Tri-Five, you can watch it, kind of see the process. But thanks, guys, for watching. As always, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we are doing 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, doing these live. And just drop some comments if you have something you want to see. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you guys later.